Hi, this is Loudest Crow. I'm Jonathan Louderback.
I'm Justin Kroh, and we're here to caw through the noise. I need to get better at keeping a straight face.
That's pretty hard, man. I can't do it.
I'm too jovial.
I'm too tired. I'm tired. I guess if you get me in the right mood, I'm a giggly bitch. That's what I would describe myself as. I think that's a good descriptor for like my general self too.
Yeah.
I'm just a giggly bitch.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely the same way. And I would hope not to an annoying extent. And most people say, oh no, you're fine. But still. See, that's actually a point that we can start off with. It's like, why is like apathy or indifference or like lack of joy often seen as like a cool or admirable trait?
I wouldn't say necessarily it's cool. I think that a lot of people are more anxious than they let on, and one of the ways you can control anxiety is exerting control, and one of the ways you can exert control is to to exude some sort of personality, and I think people choose a personality of non-caring, especially our generation, because it's a very easy one to put on. So whenever it comes to whether or not, I think that's why, I think it's, whenever people see somebody who is outgoing or jovial or loud or boisterous, I know my first response is to cringe a little and be like, oh my gosh, I wouldn't do that. That's like, I feel, because I look around like, are we breaking some sort of unknown rule? And the reality, more often than not, is no, we're not. It's like whenever we were sitting there at the Alamo waiting for the movie to start during the trailers, it's like, I would argue that maybe you shouldn't be talking in the trailers, but it's not the end of the world if you're talking during the trailers, especially if the lights haven't dimmed. You know what I mean? But yeah, I was still like, and I had to, rein myself in because I'm like, oh my gosh, somebody's going to do something. But nobody was going to do anything, because you still had waiters running back and forth and all that sort of jazz.
Yeah.
But it's just, and I think what we've seen going into, like, our generation being predominant, like, I know you may have experienced this going into a classroom, at least for the first day, especially in high school. It's like, the way my grandma described it, you'd go in and the teacher couldn't get the class to shut up in college. Now you go in and the teacher can't get anyone to fucking say anything.
Exactly. Okay. Man, I was talking with one of my professors from last semester. I'm going to have him again in the fall. It's Dr. Vaglis, my intro to philosophy professor.
That's a pretty dope name.
It is. And him and I were talking in his office, just because I love going to check in on my professors from time to time. And I was talking to him, and I was like, I was apologizing for being so like engaged and enthusiastic in his class, which I feel like is a very weird thing to apologize for.
But you're breaking the social norm.
But I'm breaking the social norm, and so I was like, well, I'm sorry. I didn't want to overstep. I didn't want to over participate. I didn't want to take away from other people's learning experience. I was just really passionate about it. And Justin was like, Justin, you're fine. I love it when you're like that. I just wish more kids were like that, because and then he described that's how it was in his day. He'd be with his friends in his class, and they'd be talking, getting in trouble with the teacher and stuff, or talking during the lectures. And then what they'd do is after the lecture, they'd go have lunch and spend hours talking about whatever they talked about in class. So their enthusiasm, their engagement was so powerful that it extended for hours beyond the classroom. And yeah, it just makes me wonder, it's like, why are people so afraid of engaging? My biggest class was the least engaged and most quiet one. Granted, that class was a fuse class, which is like one of the gen eds that they require freshmen to take, where they call it fusion because it's supposed to fuse passion and profession. And so you choose a topic of your interest, and then you write about that topic. And that's where the grammar and comp kind of portion comes in. It's like, well, here's how to write, but at least you get to write about something you're interested in, right? Mm-hmm. And so it was okay. I was still kind of mad I had to take that since I took Dr. Bob's grammar and comp course in high school. But I think I've already talked about that on here anyway. The point is, biggest class, least engagement. I was like, what? Why?
That doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't. Now, one thing that was weird is I had two professors instead of one, and so it was harder for them to, like, work together to control the room, which is weird. It's counterintuitive. You would think, like, two professors, twice the coverage, it's going to be easier to, like, keep the kids in check. It's going to be easier to keep everyone focused. Well, no.
Yeah, it's required teamwork to do that.
Exactly. And so it's like, and that makes me wonder, it's like, what other life situations seem like they'd be best when we bring in more people, but ultimately you're better off like working alone. Not to say that it's like other people are holding you back.
I think
just to say
like,
teamwork sometimes makes things harder.
A good professor, because like it depends on the classroom, it depends on the age of the kids. In the circumstance of a college class like that, I think especially if it's something like grammar and comp or you're writing, I think having two is wise in the sense that students have double the amount of people they can ask questions to, right? Maybe in a philosophy class it could be distracting because then the unity of the message is being disrupted by having multiple authority figures. But say once again bouncing back to the other direction, like if my mom would love to have another teacher in her classroom for kindergarten because she's one teacher with 25 kindergartners, right? And that's like you're not even just teaching at that point; you're tying shoes.
Yeah, you're babysitting almost.
Yeah, you're doing both. You're teaching them to be functional human beings, which requires a lot of one-on-one, which you can't do all the time if you have 25 kids and one of them is like pooping his pants all the time. You know what I mean?
Oh no. Okay, side tangent really quick. That reminds me of one day. It was one day. It was first grade. I remember it vividly. I got something real bad, and I was more than potty trained at that point. But for whatever reason that day, I could not control my bowels at all.
I mean, whenever you're in first grade, like, if you live in potty trained for a year, it's like accidents happen.
Well, yeah, accidents happen, but
more than a year, I suppose.
But I can't remember how many times that day. I think I actually counted. I think at school it was 7. At home it was 2. I kept going back to the nurse to ask for spare pairs of underwear over and over and over. I felt so bad, but like I couldn't stop it. And
it's
so
really
embarrassed.
It's really interesting. I think it's the same situation. I know this is gonna sound bad, but elderly folks go through that. Where it's like you've been trained, and then a lot of society is based around that training. Like I think, Freud wasn't entirely far off in saying one of the stages of development was learning to be potty trained because it's just such a deeply societal thing. Like humans aren't necessarily that way. Like if you're out in the sticks, like you could just poop anywhere, right?
Like your cat.
Yeah, pretty much. But I think that elderly folks, whenever they start losing that control, it could be deeply embarrassing because suddenly you're having to say, I'm losing control of myself. And I think that especially in America, but just humans in general, so much of their worldview is baked into the assumption that they're in control of their own body. So I can deeply understand. Whenever it comes to being a kid, though, that just happens sometimes. It's nothing to get embarrassed or sad about. I know you probably know that, but it's like if I had a kid because I remember I had a kid in my class. I never had it that bad or anything like that. I remember I had a kid in my class in like my first grade class peed their pants a couple of times, but like. They're kids, first grade. If you're in first grade, you're 7 at the most, right? Maybe 8.
If you got held back or something,
exactly
late, yeah.
But you're still tiny. Like I it's hard for me to wrap my head around how tiny, it was hard to wrap my head around how tiny a 7 and 8-year-old was until I've been in elementary schools again, because of substitute teaching. But they are babies. They're not people. They're just little babies.
Little babies.
Little babies.
Man, it's weird because whenever I think about a lot of my friends from like elementary school or something, that I grew up with or whatever, their voice in my memories is replaced by their older selves, and so
yeah, you look
for
back,
the most part, yeah. So I'll look back on my buddy Jared from kindergarten, and I'll be like, "Oh, hi, Justin. Do you want to go down the slide with?" Or something.
Yeah,
like that.
No, I get that.
Because he has a super deep voice, and it's so funny.
I'm sure there's some sort of phenomenon you could say that is because it's like you in relationships with significant others. It's very in with your parents. You usually see them as they were when they were young, because usually they see themselves as they were when they were young, and you see yourself as you were when you were young. And that's why it could be kind of like the toad in the water, in the boiling water or whatever. It's like sometimes if things are changing, you don't really know until it's too late. Because you're just living your life, especially for old folks. You don't know until you fall and can't get up. Which is, part of it. It's a meme. It's true.
Yeah,
but
the life alert.
I remember I read recently. It's one day you will jump for the last time, which is a weird thing because of course there's gonna be a last time for everything, but I've never really thought about the idea that I could never jump or just do that. I've always taken that for granted. You know, but one day you
Yeah.
would be too old. You can still walk, you can still move, but jumping would probably be a no-go. You know?
That is a weird, yeah, because like obviously like there'll come a day like where you can't walk again. Like that fact, like we've already kind of grappled with that.
Yeah.
But like things like jumping, it's like there's more subtle things that that like you said that we take for granted and that we don't very much think about. It's like, yeah,
You know, I take stairs two steps at a time.
I do as well.
One day I won't be able to do that, and then one day I won't be able to take stairs. You know, why are we going down this pathway?
I don't know. We kind of started racing in this direction. It's because we were talking about classrooms and stuff, and then you start talking about kindergartners, and then we start talking about old age and losing and not having control, and we talked about losing that control later in life. That is a weird thing though, how like old age oftentimes mirrors young age.
Oh, it does. My grandma has always told me the two most discriminated groups are the young and the very old, in terms of age, because people when they get around their 30s and 40s have lived in control for so long of their bodies that they can never picture without, and they look at people who can't on both ends of the spectrum and like, yeah, you're fucking dumb. You know what I mean? Like really, like
Yeah,
old
that
folks
makes sense.
sometimes can't. Like you'll find some old people, and this is not the norm. And you should exercise, you should live healthy. But you also find some older folks who do that, who through genetic or accidents or whatever it might be, just can't, who lose control of that, right?
Yeah.
And you look at that, and it's easy to say it's your fault, right? But no, it's just entropy working.
Have you seen Nikocado Avocado on YouTube before?
Yes, he's the guy that eats a lot, isn't he? Like he's the guy that's like literally killing himself by eating.
Yeah. Oh, actually, in a recent like development, he claims to have been losing a lot of weight, and he looks the part too. So I don't think he's like lying or doing it as a part of an act or something. And so he might be turning things around. Which
I hope so. I've seen only clips of his stuff. But it really freaks me out to see him eating so much food. Like I just like it grosses me out. It makes it. You know, one thing he has done for me, even in clips that I've seen, is like fast food. Just like I look at it, it looks fake. You know, whenever he's all laid out like that, it looks like the plastic food you'd play with your toy kitchen in your room or whatever.
It does.
You know what I mean?
Then he just eats it.
Yeah.
Like what?
It's like, oh my gosh.
The only reason I bring that up is because the way you said it's your fault, it reminds me of his thing where it's like, it's your fault. It just reminded me of that. All those weird, quirky mannerisms and whatnot, and phrases and the sayings. Like I could easily imagine like a plush toy of him when you squeeze it, it like spits out one of those lines.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, that's the kind of person he is. He is his whole identity has kind of become like a marketable plush, right? Because there's that meme that went around, but that's really the kind of person.
Oh shit! Damn it!
You know, I'm going to coin that term, the marketable plush personality. That's what he has. He's trying to sell himself to others.
I didn't realize, but Tamman actually did get me pretty good, bastard.
Kitty cat getting the scratches in.
Yeah, I mean, I was hurting. I was like, oh.
Isn't that weird? Like, we'll like get cut or scraped, and like especially like with rock climbing, like I'll be clobbering up a wall, I'll be banging myself up, and I'll get down, and I'll be like, oh, nice, I did it. And like a minute or two later, I'll just like look at my arms and legs and be like, ow!
No, it's whenever you get off the wall, for
yeah.
sure. It's like one of those things that, like, I remember in my intro to psychology class, we were talking about you're just blazing past all these things. Like you're going 100 miles an hour because of survey class. One of the things I really wanted to stop and think about, though, whenever I left, was the different types of intelligence, and there's different definitions and such. And I love the one that includes mechanical intelligence and like kinesthetic, like body intelligence, because there are people out there who just have a really innate sense for like how their bodies function. And it's really tried to make me reflective, like while I'm exercising, climbing, or doing anything. Because you can really focus on the muscle groups and the body. Like, you can feel yourself, and you can push your limits, and you can know your limits. And I think there are people out there who, like, know how far they can push themselves. And then there are those who, like, just focus. They do the exercise and, like, wait, why do I hurt? you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, you just said something. Oh, yeah. So, talking about, like the body and stuff and knowing your body. I saw this funny post the other day where it was like, okay, my brain already knows how my body works, so why am I failing my anatomy tests? My brain knows the secrets, it just won't tell me.
That's really funny. Yeah, it is very funny. Like, your brain does know those things. It does, but it doesn't
doesn't have language attached to them.
It doesn't have a language attached to them.
Yeah.
And even then, there are so many things in your body that you don't know. Like that you wouldn't be, like, you'd have to be told there's a bone there. You know what I mean? Because you don't feel your bones most of the time.
Most of the time, yeah. You still have nerves in them.
But you don't, like, most of the time, you're not like, oh, that's my bone.
That's my bone.
You don't feel it the same way, like, constantly. And I think it's probably because sensory-wise, the brain is always taking in information through sight, whenever you're conscious usually. Hearing, smell, touch. So it's like, just like, probably like your RAM is being used up.
Well, that's exactly, yeah, because it's just like when do you hear the air conditioning?
Mm-hmm.
You didn't hear it like 3 seconds before.
Yeah,
because you tuned it out.
Settles in. One of my favorite things from a childhood book I read. Have you ever read the Ranger series?
No, I've not.
So it's this little. I'm not even sure how well it works, but they're attacking a castle. It's like medieval fiction, and they're attacking the castle. Like, how do we get in? Their guards are really, really vigilant. So what we'll do is we'll stage a false attack, where we'll lose, we'll die, and they took like this ladder that was covered in something, and they ran up. They got shot, and they fell down, and the guards were like, "Are they moving? No." And they stayed there for the entire day. And the guards would be like, okay, no one's there, moving still. And they'd move on until eventually that thing in sight settled into the background. Right? And they just didn't think about it. Right? Which is like the weird how that can happen for every sense. Like, you know it can happen for noise. You know it can happen for anything. But you don't usually think it could happen for sight. Right?
Well, yeah. And, some scientists have like proposed like other senses that we have that just don't have like a specific sensory organ, unlike our other senses. And one of those is time passing, and that one's like definitely like if we are to define that as a sense, like, that one can definitely be one that fades into the background, where you just kind of jolt yourself up and you're like, wait, it's been like 5 hours.
But it's I think that's like attached to the flow state. I've always been really interested in the flow state because I've everyone enters into it time and again. But this idea, like, whenever you lose the sense of time, and you're just solely focused and in the moment doing the thing that you're doing, I think I most often enter it whenever I'm reading. Like, I've tried to describe this to other people. I'll try and describe it again. But sometimes I read really fast, and I realize it's not because I'm actually reading the lines anymore. What happens is I'll start reading, and then if you were to ask me to remember, like, to recall what I was doing while I was reading, I usually wouldn't be able to tell you. I remember what was happening in the book. Like, I remove myself from my senses in that sense, and I'm up here thinking about what I'm reading. It's almost like watching a movie in a sense. Yeah. But I don't often remember, like, oh, I was sitting down doing that at that moment in time. And I'm sure you've had similar moments, either reading or maybe coding. Or
definitely coding, yeah. Yeah, because just like with the other, like, sensory things that we were talking about, you get into that state where everything just fades into the background because you're laser focused on the task at hand.
Now, there's a video I watched, and I haven't read the book, but it was a fighting game guy. He likes to talk about psychological phenomenon in relation to competitive stuff, because it's like really valuable whenever you're trying to parse out how to win, how to lose in a video game. It really can be. And he read this book called Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. I forget who wrote it. I really want to read it one day. But there's this idea that, and it's very true, even like from a layman's terms, that there's thinking fast, which is your neutral state, where you have all these shortcuts in your brain for thinking. Like, you develop muscle memory, you develop almost mind memory in a sense of performing activities that you don't really need to actually slow down to think through the process. And there's slow thinking usually when it's new, right? And slow thinking is the type of thinking that chess players do. It's intentional thinking where you're actually guiding your thoughts. When you wrest control of it and you're directing it at something. And fun fact, it actually burns a lot of calories. You lose a lot of energy. Like, I think chess players, like peak chess players, whenever they're at tournaments, they burn something like 3,000 calories a day. Or something crazy like that.
Literal big brain energy.
Pretty much. Like, they're literally burning. Like, it's like, how are these fucking chess players so skinny? It's because they're thinking so hard.
Well, yeah. Like, in my philosophy of mind class, like, especially when we were talking about behaviorism and how certain cognitive capacities may have developed. One thing that I love the biology students would talk about is, like, one reason our mind might not work this way as opposed to this way is because it's just too expensive to do that. It just takes too much energy to do that.
Mm-hmm.
to do all those operations. It's like I'm reminded of my computer in my computer science class. It's like if we're doing some kind of project that involves like recursion or something, that battery will drain super fast.
Mm-hmm.
Because the computer just has to think about it so hard.
You know, I always think about batteries at time. It's like it's just the amount of time your computer is running. But in a really real sense, the battery in your computer and the electricity you're drawing from the wall is being directly translated into activities that the computer is doing.
Yeah.
Which is weird to think. It's like...
Well, it's just the movement of really tiny mechanical parts. Much like, you know, in us, it's the... it's the movement of chemicals in us.
Yes, but it's still the movement of chemicals in us, and there is we do have electricity in our bodies, very very low.
Yes.
You know, very very low current, but it's there. You know, which is why electricity can fuck with our
Yeah.
brains. You know, whenever you get shocked, it's fascinating. It's all fascinating.
It's all very fascinating. To loop it back around to what I was talking about with my college classes. So I was talking about the big class having least engagement, which is kind of sad, but like what we were talking about, people just seem to, especially nowadays, be apprehensive to. Okay, actually no, they aren't apprehensive to engagement because they do it with social media all the time. Mm-hmm. I guess they're more apprehensive to communal engagement because if you're making a social media post, you are you're directing something, you're directing content towards others. Whereas if you're in a room full of people, or if you're having a conversation like we are, you're not really directing anything, you're kind of sharing the engagement.
You know what disassociation is?
Yes.
I feel like, in a very real way, disassociation is something that happens a lot more. And this is totally riffing. I don't know. I have no basis in the study or anything like this.
Oh, we have no basis for anything on this podcast.
Exactly. But this has some consequences. So I want to put that disclaimer out there. But I think a lot of people disassociate way more than they think they do. And I think I've realized I do it too. It's like going about your daily life. Whenever you have all this experience in a safe, relatively safe manner, interacting with media and other people through the internet, through your computer, suddenly putting yourself physically there is a lot more daunting. And I think a lot of people, because you see it all the time with people on their phones, or I see it at work with I go up to people at work and there's a marked difference in interacting with a younger person usually than an older person. You walk up to an older person and hey, how can I help you? And they're like, yeah, I need this, this, and this. They know they're waiting for you to interact. Or if you talk with a younger person, this is what happens most of the time. You walk up, hey, can I help you? No. And then you walk back, you watch them, and you're looking at they bounce between the walls, they're looking at prices, they're looking at sizes, they don't know what the fuck they're doing. And you basically have to either go up to them again or put yourself into here's what I usually do. I walk up and I'll be sorting clothes in a convenient location not far from them to make myself open and not scary for them to ask for assistance.
Yeah.
And then I'll do the same fucking process I did for the old person. But I think it's people are I feel like people are up here more, if that makes any sense. They're existing less in the moment in their literal sensory capacity, and more in maybe an internal monologue of some sort in public, out in the world, especially if they're by themselves. It's usually a bit different if they're in a crowd of people. I've certainly seen myself doing this.
I do that too. Just on my way here, I was just running this internal monologue in my head and thinking about things.
Were you focused on driving?
Time. No.
Yeah, I don't either. It's weird.
Well, and maybe it's not even just social media, but media in general, kind of just brings out this intense narrative drawing capacity that we have, and just exacerbates it because we're constantly being confronted with whether it be a movie that has a story, or even just a picture that tells a story, like on Instagram or something. Mm-hmm. You see a post and you see someone on vacation and you quickly build a narrative of what they're up to.
No, you're entirely right. We have very narrative thought processes, and we're constantly developing that narrative as we're just walking.
Yeah, and so since we're confronted with so much stuff that caters to that narrative building process, it's easy to see ourselves as some kind of character in a story, or even a protagonist of our own story, which
it's true.
It's true in a sense. Yeah, but it just makes it so much more intense. When you're going out in public, you need to ask for help. It's you don't think about asking for help because you're That just doesn't come to mind when you're too busy building a narrative. Or like, okay, I'm at the store. I gotta find this thing, and I'm going to find this thing by looking over there, and I'll find it. Because like oftentimes when I'm looking for something and don't know where it is, I'm not even focused on finding it. I'm focused on like, oh, what am I going to do with this thing later, or what kind of thing do I even want, or like what's the cost of this thing going to be? Like I keep thinking outside of the moment.
Yeah, like it's like I think a lot of people. I can't claim this is the norm because I don't know, but just in my very anecdotal interactions with people of different generations and the capacity that I've worked, it definitely feels like older people are more present in their gaze. You know what I mean? Like they're like, okay, I need to go to the store to do this, and then they're at the store doing that. Whereas, like people our age, it feels like they're already at the location. Like they're already got the thing, they're already doing the thing. This is just a means to an end to get there. If that makes any sense. There's a different vibe there. There's a different feeling.
Well, and I also wonder if this is just like a generational thing, and not necessarily like dependent on the modern times. Because like yes, modern technology can exacerbate these things, but it kind of makes sense that
Well, people have always developed narratives for themselves.
Well, that and also like younger people. Just from my first anecdotes from older people, it's like when you're young, you naturally just keep chasing the milestones because that's what you're raised to do. Mm-hmm. But when you're a toddler. You get to the point where you're potty trained, yay! And then you get to the point where you go to kindergarten, yay! And then you go to 5th grade, yay! And then middle school.
I think there's this big. It's almost an entirely different conversation, but I do think that there is this big jarring position, usually when you're about our age, where there are still milestones to hit, but the milestones that you hit when you're young are relatively easy and highly rewarded. I don't know if you've had this experience, but like I feel like the milestones you hit nowadays are like, yay.
No, I definitely feel that.
You know what I mean?
Like I looking back on it at least, like in my memory, my 7th birthday, like my parents went all out for my 7th birthday. They drove me around town and had 7 fun activities planned for me to do to celebrate my 7th birthday. And like I was in public and I was all happy and smiley, and my parents were bragging about how it was my birthday, and all these like old ladies were coming up to me. And
you just turned 20 and you're like, happy birthday, kid.
Well, like when I turned 18, it's like I'm a legal adult now. There's a huge shift there, like right when it comes to like my personhood and my place in society. And I went out and had a nice dinner with my parents and whatnot. But like, it was just like, yeah, you're an adult now. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's like it's not bad to celebrate and extensively celebrate young kids. It's not bad. The difficulty comes whenever you teach these kids to expect these celebrations with every milestone they reach, and then suddenly they're not there anymore, and you're like, "What the fuck? What is this? What life is like?" I know Randy really experiences that because she's an only child. You're an only child too, so it's a very similar experience where it's like you are your parents' world for like the first 10 years. You're just everything, and then suddenly your parents are like, whenever your parents start backing away, it's like really you're like, where the hell am I? I've had a very different experience, to be blunt, because my parents are divorced, and I had some, I hesitate to, difficult siblings, they just needed a lot of attention, so I was left alone, right? I just kind of got to do my own thing. I really did, for a long time. So, like, they celebrated things, I still had Christmas and stuff, but it wasn't like, it never felt like every single milestone was being celebrated, ever. So, like, I'm looking around at my peers who are like, what's happening now, and I'm like, first time.
Yeah. Another thing that I think has to do with kids nowadays especially being less engaging and enthusiastic about it is because, well, just in general, like with your setting, like at the job, the kid doesn't want to look like an idiot. He's trying to present his brand. He's trying to present himself as a product.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. A lot of people are like, it's admitting that you don't know something is
weak.
Which has always been a thing. It's always been a thing. But a lot of people with the internet are able to like halfway pretend they know something. Like I've been working in a suit shop for 2 years, and I would still consider myself at best a journeyman when it comes to the knowledge of clothing. Yeah. Right? I'm not an expert. I'm not. But there are people who did 2 Google searches.
And they know everything.
Exactly. Yeah. You see this so much more nowadays. Like everyone's an expert in anything. You can't have a conversation with anybody without them pulling up a Google page and being like, "Nah, I know better than you," right? Which I've done before too, but at least nowadays I acknowledge that like there's a difference in learned expertise and familiarity and basic research.
Yeah. Well, and what I was going to lean into this is like people nowadays, thanks to social media, feel much more protective of the brand, and they see things like engaging in interaction as just opening more windows of opportunity for them to be seen as weak, or for them to have their image tainted or tarnished by something. And so it's like they almost lock up and are afraid to engage and interact because it's like, well, that just means more risk of looking like an idiot.
And that's what you see in the classrooms.
Exactly.
It's like, but it's always been the case, I think, where an opening day people don't want to answer questions in the classroom. I think that's fair. I think that's been the thing for a long time.
Yeah, but when that persists, like for the full semester, it's like, what's going on here?
And not even just that, but it's also people interacting with themselves, like with other kids. It's like what's happened. I think in part it's that. I think it's like this brand management. I also think that people, in a very interesting turn of events, if you are able to stay connected with your friends from high school or your core friend group because of the internet, and then you go to college, you move away, whatever it is, and you're sat down with a bunch of strangers, you might think to yourself, well, I don't really need to interact with these strangers because I still have a group of people. Whereas it used to be, it's like, well, fuck, I gotta interact with people or I'm gonna be alone.
That's actually a really great point. Yeah. You're dead on with like, you got a lot of these people who, you're comfortable hanging out with, and it's like, so when you're thrust into a situation with a lot of different people you've never interacted with before, it's like, well, I don't need to. Why bother interacting with these people? I don't need to.
Yeah, I don't need to. I have people,
But I think that's honestly like a really bad way of looking at it, because
for sure.
as you go through your life, you're going to have to interact with new people and know how to interact with new people and know how to form new bonds that won't last. And that's the thing. It's like Elijah and I were talking about this the other day. We are very kind of committed to the bonds that we have with people, and we have difficulty breaking apart from people who are toxic, or just letting time break us apart, like naturally. Like we feel this need to hold it all nice and tight.
It's different than it used to be, because it used to be more effort to maintain those things. So humans are naturally lazy. It's just normal, right?
Yeah.
Because your brain is always telling you, save energy. Your brain is always in someone's survival mode. It's like, save energy, don't do those things, right? And I think that's very natural to have. Like, it's very possible to have a disciplined mindset, but it's always normal to have your brain telling you, no, don't do that, right? Because it saves energy. It used to be a lot more fucking difficult to stay in touch with people. So you stayed in touch with them if they really, really mattered and if you had the time to do so. Nowadays, it's like, some people be like, why haven't you messaged me? And it's like, yeah, why haven't I messaged you? It's like 5 seconds. You know what I mean? It's like, it used to be, oh man, if you didn't like somebody, I'm so sorry, life's been so busy, and now it's you have no excuse. You don't. Which is not necessarily inherently a bad thing, but it does leave people more able to maintain toxic relationships.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's an interesting dichotomy. It's an interesting difference than what our parents have gone through. I'm not sure if your parents are the same, but my parents don't really have they're friends. They have friends. They have work friends, but they don't really have friends. You know what I mean?
That's exactly how my parents are, and that it boggles my mind to think about that. And I'm like, I can't imagine not having at least a couple really close friends I can always go to. And they'll tell me about friends that they had from high school or something that they keep in touch with on Facebook.
That's not the same.
It's not the same. And it's like even the generation above us, or 2 generations above us, because my parents are Gen Xers. It's like even they don't seem to want to engage and interact with the people immediately around them as much as they do with people who are out of their lives, but they can stay connected with through Facebook or something.
I think it's and as much as we talk about how our generation is really bad about it, I think what's really interesting is I think that our generation. Sorry, allergies are so bad. Is way better at forming, at least more numerously, and of course this is just from personal experience, deeper connections, right? Maybe part of the reasoning is well, I have really good, actual good friends. I have friends who I could trust with my deep shit. Why do I want to form surface level connections with people I don't care about? Maybe that's part of the idea, because I think my parents they have friends, they have people they stay in touch with, just like yours, but they don't have somebody that they could go to and vent about, whatever it is going on in their life.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm not even entirely sure that's a generational thing. That's my experience. But I'm not sure if it's everyone at my age is that way. I wouldn't be surprised if they're not, though. I help a lot of athletes. Athletes give good vibes sometimes, but like I don't even know. I have a bone to pick with anybody. It is totally a side tangent. Who pursues one thing in their life at the cost of everything else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, definitely, because that was me, in a sense, while I was working on my game. And we've talked about this before, but I got so laser focused on that I just kind of left other stuff.
That is true.
In the background.
And it's definitely good that you want to be more well-rounded. But even then, pursuing a game is different than the level of commitment that I think pursuing like a sport in college does.
You are definitely right in that. Like sometimes I'll be like walking around Drury and like I'll see like the athletes like walking down like wearing their their jerseys and whatnot, and I'll be like, I couldn't imagine having all this classwork and having to like do like a sport like three practices a week and then a game every weekend, like, and like on top of that sometimes they'll also have like a part-time job. Like,
yeah,
I couldn't imagine doing that.
It's fucking crazy. And it's like for some of these athletes, right? That's been their entire life. Like they didn't do school for that. They didn't do school for the sake of school. They did school for the sake of the sport. But what I see a lot, right? Because I just have this perspective of people bringing in their kids. Like of those athletes, the people who are going to keep being athletes after college is like
very
minuscule.
low.
It's a tiny percent. And not that it's inherently bad to pursue the sport, especially if you love it, even if you don't get to go on. I think a lot of people who pursue those things for their entire lives, because I've seen it a couple times, they're like, okay, I'm out of college, I didn't get into a sports team. What's the point of life?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas like video game development, sure, you put yourself all the way into that, but that's something like you're an indie developer. Like you could like take a break, pursue your career, and then one day be like, you know what? I'm gonna do that. Well, it's not like you have to get signed to a sports team to be able to keep playing.
Well, in the skills that I developed while working on that game, I learned how to market things. I learned a little bit of graphic design. I created content on YouTube. Got a little bit. I got a platform built for me. So like when I make another game, I'll already have like 100, 200 customers lined up for it. So I have like a sort of guaranteed success now for future endeavors. Like so the programming. Like in like music composition, like working on that game taught me so many skills that I can apply in other areas. But like with a sport, you're not going to walk into, at least I don't think you'll walk into, say, like Microsoft headquarters and be like, watch this, do like a 3-pointer, like do like a half-court shot and get the job. Like that's not going to happen.
No, very much so.
Sports laser focus on like very specific skills and abilities, and like sometimes the physical things that you build there can help you in other
they do. Like being fit when you're young is very good for your overall long-term health.
It very much is.
It's less that. It's more like, I guess maybe it's not the athletes that really grind my gears. You know what really grinds my gears? It's the parents who push their kids into being school athletes.
There you go.
Fuck them.
There you go. The
Fuck
soccer
those
moms,
guys.
man.
Oh my god, I hate them. They're so it's like, especially like, okay, a mom coming in, like just I have a lot of experience with them recently just because having been in prom season, so it's very fresh, it's very recent. But these parents who are more than anything like projecting their desires for their life on their kids. It's like I think that there are plenty of kids out there, especially young men, who if you're like, okay, I'll support you to do, like if you're just like the kind of parents like, I'll support you into pursuing what you want to pursue. Plenty of those kids would pursue sports. And if that's what you want to do, even when you're young, even despite the downsides, you do you. You do it.
Yeah.
I want your parents to maybe provide you alternatives and give you well-rounded growth, yes, but you still pursue the sport. But you have these kids who get to the end of their college career and the only experience they've ever had in their life is their sport. Their club practices, the late nights, because that's what their parents did to them. And then they're like, what the fuck is it now?
What do I do now? So like, they'll get some job, like at a grocery store, maybe some kind of office job, or like.
Well, they'll have a college degree, right? So like they'll have something.
They'll have something, but like oftentimes, even while they're getting that degree, they just can't focus on it enough, like to excel after the fact.
Or like they maybe even get good grades, but they don't learn. Right? Because you can, like, find myself doing this, working a job and going to school. It's really hard just to sit down and read the textbook. I'd much rather just know exactly what I need to get the grade, and then so I can go to my shift at work, so I can go home and go to bed.
Yeah.
You know, and I can see the same thing happening to a guy who has a sport they have to do and a job they have to do. Fuck that. On so many levels, I would never be able to do that.
I mean, shout out to all those student athletes out there.
Oh, student athletes are super
determined and
Usually, all like the interactions I've had with them they're usually kind. You know, they have team ethic, they have good discipline, they have good ethics, and I bet you a number of them are self-disciplined, wanting to do the sport. I just feel really bad for those kids who don't know what's next. You know, next in their life.
Well, and I assume that most student athletes, like, do give a lot of time and thought to that, but even then, it's still rough because I don't know. I couldn't imagine putting myself through like a college sport. Like maybe at the high school level, I could see myself doing that, but anything past that, it's just like it's just too much.
It is kind of funny because I'm trying to like present it as diplomatically as possible, but I am not anti-sport, but I am coming across very anti-sport.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe part of me is, it's like sports is one of those things where it's like a hobby to me. It's like a hobby where I don't feel bad that there are professionals who get paid to do it. I don't feel bad that there are people who spend their entire lives dedicated to it, because there are people who play fighting games their entire time, and I support them too. But I do think it's bad whenever, because sports are on a different scale than other hobbies. Like, they have the societal impact.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That other things don't have. Like, people tune in to the Super Bowl more than they do presidential debates.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you could argue the same for other things too, but just like, I guess it bugs me somewhat.
It's definitely a very present hobby. It's a hobby that carries a lot of weight to it, and most of that weight is just, it's not inherent to the thing. It's just we give it that, and it's weird. And we were talking about this in my philosophy class, and we're like, who's a modern day hero? And almost all the people we could list were athletes. Right, because they show physical prowess, they show determination. Oftentimes, they do show like intelligence and wit and wisdom, like Patrick Mahomes, and really the whole team. Like, yes, you have those coordinators who are doing things behind the scenes, but oftentimes you have to break the script and improvise.
Yeah, you do.
And the reason like Patrick Mahomes is so fun to watch is because he's so great at that, especially like when he's doing it with Kelsey.
It's what's really interesting is I was reading this book recently. I haven't finished it yet. I got distracted by other books. It's a bad habit of mine. But it's like this idea that we don't pursue ideals in society anymore, and that these ideals, one of them is like the warrior ideal, are being replaced or substituted for different things. It's like, it used to be that the heroes we would identify would be war heroes, but war is no longer popular because, we can know what war is like now as just a normal person, right? It used to be that if you want to know what war was like, you had to go to war. And usually you'd come home and you have the classic literary tradition of dissing war, being like, it's not all it's made out to be. But now that war isn't a thing, you have these things that kind of stand in its place as being a place where you can have kind of martial glory. And I think football's a really good example. I think it really plays on this tribal sort of idea, like, that's my tribe, and they're pushing the other tribe down and punching them in the face.
Yeah.
Kind of, not really, but you know what I mean.
No, it definitely brings out that kind of an innate desire to, it's almost a familial thing. Like, we develop this kind of weird familial connection to our tribe, like you said. And so when we see that tribe succeed, we're like, we feel as though we are succeeding. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which is just like, I don't know.
On that note, actually, that brings me to something that, it's a disturbing revelation about myself. And I think I've been getting better at it in the last couple of years, but I'm still struggling. I have trouble embracing other people's success.
I feel that. I definitely had and still do have that too.
Like I love cheering my friends on and stuff, but if it's something that I also want or that I'm also pursuing, I get needlessly competitive sometimes.
Yeah. Does this have to do with Elijah and rock climbing movie?
No.
No?
But
okay,
that'd be funny.
That would be funny, because I know Taryn's like, I'm ready for that fucker to come up and show us up,
Actually, he's back in town now, so he's probably going to be out tomorrow.
Yeah.
But, like, I have a friend who's been doing a new exercise routine, and he started his routine, like, right as I started mine with rock climbing. And I'll hear him talking about it, and every time he talks about it, I'm like, oh, good for you, buddy. And I'm like, wait, no, I should be happy for my friend getting in shape and taking care of his body.
It's competition.
But yeah, I see this competition. I'm like, oh, you did squats. Well, I was going up these giant rock walls and stuff. I'm better. Like, I feel like a vile person. Like when I had these thoughts, but for some reason, like they just keep popping up there. And I'm like, why? Why can't I just be glad that he's keeping himself in shape?
I think that's societal training. You know, we are a deeply individualistic and competitive society, which is beneficial in some ways because, you know, we strive for higher. We always want to be the best, which usually drives innovation. It drives the skill ceiling higher.
We make each other stronger.
We make each other stronger. But I also think it has this it does have that toxic undercurrent because I felt the same way. It's like, you know, I personally have had this experience. I look at my friends going to college and being able not to work, and I'm like, oh, fuck, man, I wish. And they'll talk to me about their experiences. I'm like, yeah, it's so easy since you don't have to work. And it's like, well, wait, what is the basis of that? The basis is something I'm insecure about in myself, that I'm projecting, that I'm competitive with, even though I'm not working. And you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and really quick, sometimes it goes the other way, where it's like, you know, I'm afraid of expressing myself in certain ways or talking about things I'm proud of or happy about because I'm like, well,
you don't want to make people feel bad.
I don't want to make people feel bad. I don't want to make people feel like, you know, that I'm competition. I don't want them to have that kind of gross, nasty, competitive undercurrent that you said.
Something I've come to realize about that is, like, for example, I used to be kind of jealous about all the stuff you did at the game. But I stopped to think about it, and I'm like, wait a minute. You can be jealous, John, if you put thousands of hours of effort into developing a thing.
Yeah.
So the conclusion I came to whenever it comes to making sure other people don't feel that way, that's their fucking problem. If they have a problem, they can tell you. Right? And if they have a problem and they don't tell you and they stew on it, maybe that's a sign that you shouldn't be hanging around them as much. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Because you can't censor your accomplishments for somebody else's failures. Right? Now, I'm not saying that out of a position of accomplishment myself. You know, I'm not necessarily. I'd say I'm pretty middling of the pack right now whenever it comes to what I've done. But I do think that. So a part of me really used to chafe at the idea of mediocrity. And this idea, and I think a lot of people still do, but it's like this idea that you're the middle of the pack. You're nothing special. You're not bad, but you're not unique. You're not good. But I think that's inherently flawed in the sense that we treat life as a competition. You know, a lot of us, it's like we get into a hobby with this idea that we need to be, maybe not the best, but certainly we need to be really good at it.
Yeah.
When it's like, the reality for most people, like literally 99.9999% of everybody, is that you're never going to be the fucking best at something. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't maybe try to be if you're competitive, but it does mean that there will always be somebody better than you, and if you're always focused on those people, then you're going to live a very unhappy life. So it's like, you don't have to settle for me. It's like calling it mediocrity is almost, in a way, negative. It shouldn't be called mediocrity. It should just be called living.
Yeah, because that's what it's the baseline. It's what we all do.
Yeah, and it's something I've realized about myself. It's like, oh man, I'm not doing all these projects I want to do. I'm not doing this, and that. How many people would if I was to ask somebody else who was working and going to college, would I be like, you're not fucking writing a book, you bitch. Why aren't you doing that? I wouldn't say that. I'd be like, no, you're doing right, man. You're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Get to it when you get there.
But like when we look at ourselves, we're so much harder.
Yeah. We're like, because here's the thing. It's honestly really selfish, and it's really, really bad to do that. Because whenever you hold yourself to that different standard, what you're doing is you're saying, I'm better than these people. Like, these people don't have to do it because they're human. They're just normal. I'm not normal. I'm special, and I deserve to have better standards for myself.
Man, the way, like, yeah, I never thought of it like that before, but there's a lot of truth there.
That very much is. And it's like, because here we do this a lot with a whole bunch of different things because of our individualistic society, because our geocentric worldview, where we think we're the center of the universe, where we think we're the protagonist of the story. But we often have this notion, about ourselves that we're just better. Even though we don't voice it, even though we think we don't think it, because that's not good to think that. You know, it's not good to think you're better. We think it anyway.
We do.
Right? It's like, I would never get in a car accident, because I'm not a dumbass.
I love how you said our geocentric worldview instead of egocentric. It's like, oh yes, the Earth is the center of the universe. I'm better than everyone.
yeah, but very much so. It's just that was a slip up, but it's still, it's that basis is there.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like you just have to acknowledge that at your core, and it helps a lot. It's like you are just a flawed human being who is one slip in the bathtub away from cracking your neck and dying.
Yeah.
Right? And I know it sounds kind of morbid, but it helps me in the sense that's like, you just gotta keep yourself grounded. You gotta keep your ego small. And even though, like, because sometimes your ego will balloon, even though you don't think it is.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
I experience that constantly because I'm just so amazing.
Well, it's not bad to have good confidence and to pursue things. But it is bad to, like, it's just like there's really subtle toxic mindsets. And it does a lot. It's like, in relationships, for example, I think men do this a lot. We treat women as objects even though we don't think we do. Right? What we do is we're like, what can I do? What can I change to make this person like me? And it's like, it's not a video game where you accomplish certain objectives. They're a human being. You know, if they like you, right? If they like you, then that's their thing. That's their business.
Yeah.
Right? And if you are changing yourself so that they do like you, either that's a sign that you're doing something wrong, or that they don't like who you actually are.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I love the quote. There's a YouTuber like I love watching where like he'll break apart cartoon episodes and like find a lot of valuable meaning in them. And the channel is made to express, and he has this quote that he loves throwing around, which is "express, not impress," which is very much like something that everyone like our age needs to internalize, especially people who are looking to get in a relationship, because it's like, the person for you is someone who you don't have to change for.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because if it's for you, then if you changed, you wouldn't be you. So.
And if you do change for somebody, change with them.
Yeah, exactly. Like my dad told this joke about how it's like, in a relationship, the man wants the woman to never change, and yet she's going to change, and the woman wants the man to change, but the man will never change. And I don't know how much truth there is to that, but I thought it was funny because it makes me think it's like relationships are a lot more dynamic than we might think they are.
Yeah. One of my favorite things to say that I've come to realize, it's like, I'm not saying you ever fall out of love with somebody, but you do fall in and out of passion with somebody, even if you're in a relationship with them.
Yeah.
Like, people say, oh, the honeymoon phase comes and it goes. Well, sure, the first one does. But you'll have another one, then maybe another one. Because if you're with somebody for, say, 20 years, and you want to stay with that person, it's inevitable that you're going to change in certain ways, or certain events that are going to happen that are going to allow these honeymoon phases to come and go. And there's going to be phases where you fucking hate their guts sometimes.
Yeah.
Maybe not fucking hate their guts, but certainly something bothers you, right? That's normal. If you want to be in a relationship with somebody for that long, it's normal to have these phases. As long as you have that baseline of love, of acceptance, to manage those things, right? It's like, why do old married couples bicker? It's because they know each other.
It's because they know each other. And like that reminds me, like someone asked out a couple months ago. That ship has sailed by now. But one reason I wanted to go out with him was like, oh, well, this person's different from me in a lot of ways, so we can fill in each other's weaknesses and we'll be like a power couple. But the more I thought about that, I was like, no matter who I'm in a relationship with, I'm going to find grounds to like bicker with them. If they're different from me, I'm going to bicker with them because we're different. If I'm the same, or if I'm very similar to them, I'm going to bicker with them because she and I just are going to know each other's buttons and know how to press them. And
or even something you might come into, it's like, oh, you find somebody who is really good at what you're good at, right? And if your ego is based around being the best at this thing, and then you have a partner whose also ego is based around being the best at this thing, even though you have something in common and being good at that thing, that might lead to chafing.
Chafing. I love the word chafing that you use in this context.
Well, yeah, because it's not like burning. It's just like,
it's
uncomfortable. It's like, yeah.
Rubbing up against each other too much. Okay. Never mind. Phrasing.
Breathe.
But, like, one thing that you said, like, none of us will ever be the best at what we do, at least most likely.
Oh, you might be.
Well, the way I like thinking about it is, given my background, my upbringing, my circumstances, and my resources, I am the best at using those.
Oh,
because
yeah.
I'm the only one who has them.
You are the only person who has your upbringing. And the people who are closest to having your upbringing are siblings, and you don't have any siblings.
Yeah.
So you're like, from the circumstances you originated from, you're it. And it's really interesting you bring that up. I think we should be ending before too long. One, because
53 minutes, yeah.
Because I have to pee, and
Amazing.
It's getting close to an hour. But
it's getting close to an hour.
One of my favorite conversations is like, okay, ask a basketball fan, who's the greatest of all time? And a lot of people will be like, yeah, it's Michael Jordan. Most people will be like, oh no, it's Steph Curry or whatever. They have different opinions. It's like, how could they have different opinions? Isn't there an obvious metric that you can measure in a game, like a sport like that, where there's obvious metrics to who scored the most, who did this? Because even in situations where there are objective units of measurement, right? They're still never going to be necessarily the best. The only time you can ever really truly objectively measure at best is whenever it's like a exclusionary game where one person wins and one person loses in a one-on-one environment. That's it. And even then, you could argue that person didn't fight this person, that person didn't fight this person, or whatever.
Or that
right?
person was dehydrated when they went up against that person.
Exactly.
Or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's like you can never truly, like, objectively, you can subjectively know, but you never truly objectively know who is the best, barring some extreme circumstances, like a round-robin tournament of some variety.
Or you can say, like, if it's something extremely specific, it's like, oh yes, I am the best at building things out of discarded phone cases, or something like really
even
obscure
then,
like
here's
that.
the thing. Even then, you'd be like, yeah, I'm the best at doing that. There's some guy in India.
There's some guy in India.
Yeah, who's just like, who's been doing that since he was 2, and can build like the Notre Dame out of discarded phone cases, right? It's one of those things where it's just not a. So, one of my favorite things whenever it comes to setting goals that I've learned is that you want your goals to be specific, actionable, short term.
Yeah.
Right? You don't want to be like, I am going to be the best at this. You want to say, I want to learn this, or I want to be able to code this certain thing.
That's exactly what I did with my game. I was like, I want to make a game where you can move in 3D. That was it. And move in 3D, collide with walls, that was it. And I was like, oh, I'll make a backrooms game, because then I'll get to throw in some procedural generation. It's like, oh, I'll add this feature, because then I can do that. And then it just naturally evolved to where it wasn't, I had this big goal that I was chasing towards the whole time. I had lots of small goals, and then eventually I got to this point where I could look ahead and be like, wait, I should just make this into a full game, and then I did that. Right? And like what helped me so much in developing this game, I made a to-do list. And I updated the to-do list over time. I would have like these general ideas I wanted to kind of work towards, but I wouldn't immediately tackle all of them. I'd break down some ideas into like steps, and then I'd do all the steps. And when I was done with that, I would look at the rest of my ideas and be like, okay, which one do I want to break into steps now? And then I'd do that and do that. And you know, the only way I was able to get my game done was by breaking it up into tiny little tasks on a to-do list, because it is so satisfying, like psychologically, to have a ton of really small things and to cross them off a to-do list. It's so much more satisfying to do that than like have this really big thing. And even if you make it through that
it's like,
without organizing yourself,
I remember
like,
the first meeting of Jelly Donut Co.
Yeah.
You know, that RPG that we came up with, and you know, cool idea, awesome fucking idea. But it's like, how do you get started on an idea like that? You know, like how do you really? Like, and that's one of the biggest failings, I think, is because we had all these people who had no experience at that time, right? Even you. You might have a little experience because you did all that Khan Academy stuff. You had some coding, but like even then, like we all had we had no experience. But like we want to make this game. What we should have done is been like, okay, let's you make a song, you make a single character, you do this, and then we build on that over time. It's one of those things in the D&D space that is often advised. Like whenever you're building a world, it's often advised 2 things. One, if you are looking to play in the world, only build the parts of the world that your players are going to see. Right? And build those really nice and in-depth, because otherwise, because then you can have that illusion of having that fully fleshed out thing. And if you're going to build it out, then don't, usually the advice is don't try and make everything at once. Maybe start big, maybe make the continents, but then make a country, then make a town, then make a ruler, then make this, then make that, then make that, It's such an easier way of organizing your thoughts than I want to make all of this at the same time and generate it all in one go.
One reason I love Minecraft is because it taught me how to set reasonable goals. Because when you go in, while you're playing Minecraft, especially in survival mode, you're like, I want to build a castle. But you don't just build the castle. First, you're like, okay, I have to build like the layout. It's like, okay, well, to do that, I need to figure out what blocks I want to use. And so you'll play around with some blocks and you'll figure that out. And then you can build the layout. And once you build the layout, you're like, okay, how tall do I want it to be? I'll make it this tall. And then like, okay, how do I want to section off the rooms? And how tall should each floor be? And then you do that, and then you have this like shell of a castle. And then like, okay, how am I going to decorate each room? It's like you do it step by step by step by step by step. And doing that in Minecraft is a nice, easy, clean, virtual way of visualizing the goal setting process. It's like, you're thrown to a random environment, you're not told to do anything, so you have to figure out what you want to do. You have to figure out how to make yourself want to do things, right? Because just like with real life, you have a lot of adults who just kind of they get on this track and they stay on that track and they don't do much else. They get kind of complacent.
And they don't ever think of, because it's like you don't want to, like, you want to live your life and you don't want to set pie in the sky goals. But I think always have a goal.
Always have a goal. Always have something.
Even if it's as simple as
yeah.
I want to improve my credit, or even if it's as simple as I want to, fix my car, or even if it's just in your hobbies, I think that having small actionable goals makes life way less existentially terrifying.
Well, it also just makes it so much richer and fulfilling because it's like, it gives reason and purpose to a lot of the things that you take for granted and just kind of do out of habit.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have my my weight loss goal right now, and I've been working toward that, and it's like it makes the action of rock climbing so much purposeful because like I still enjoy it, and I'd probably do it even if I didn't have a goal of losing weight, or like once I get to my target weight, I'll probably still keep doing it. But while I'm doing it, and I'll get home and step on the scale, and I'll be like, nice. It makes it so much more fruitful and meaningful to do. So goals are awesome. They really
they are awesome. But the trick is how to set them, how to manage them, and acknowledging. I think one of the most crucial things with goals is whenever I say manageable and like reasonable, I mean you have to kind of take into account the circumstances of your life at the time.
Yeah.
It's like me saying to myself, you know what? I am going to write a book by the end of the summer. Would be unreasonable in the circumstance that I don't have a free summer. I'm going to be working. I'm going to be taking classes. I'm going to be doing stuff with friends. It's like,
yeah,
it'd be more reasonable to say, I'm going to write the first chapter of the book this summer. And then you accomplish that goal early, and then you're like, okay, maybe I'll write a second chapter, and then a third chapter. And allow your goals, like you said before, to naturally evolve themselves into something that is a more complete entirety.
Yeah. I mean, any big achievement is just a collection of very small achievements.
Very much so.
Right. Anything big that you've done in your life, you can break into a lot of tiny steps. And the people like it's an easy message to say, but it's a hard message to internalize. It's a hard message to live out.
It is.
Because like especially nowadays when like the information that we have on the internet spreads around a lot faster, it's very easy to see what everyone's up to.
And it's very easy to see people who are just extremely good at whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
I know it's very difficult in the creative space because you find somebody like I was doing piano for a while. I've been taking a break, taking a hiatus, and it's like you look up people who are half your age, who are like playing freaking Liszt. Playing the Bohemian, the Hungarian Rhapsody.
Bohemian Rhapsody, nice.
Have you ever listened to Hungarian Rhapsody? Yeah, it's good. It's good. I love that one.
But yeah, no, it's like I'm totally with you. And that's the thing. The most talented people are the ones who get the most attention and who people share the most.
Not always.
Well, not always, but generally on the internet,
Because here's a fact of our society and all societies in general. The people who are the best and most attractive.
That's
just
fair.
To be absolutely usually the case.
Like with my game, for example, the reason my game got 30 times fewer sales in a game that came out like a year and a half later is because that game looks better because it was made with a game engine, and it was marketed very tactfully. It was marketed with a lot of thought put into it. I just put out videos telling people, hey, here's some stuff I added. I didn't make it fancy, I didn't make it flashy, I didn't try to cater to any kind of demographic. I was straight to the point. I was like, here's what I did. I didn't dress up my game, which has its pros and cons. One thing that has been tremendously impactful about the way I run my game is, even though while talking about it I can oftentimes sound egotistical, I do have a very humble picture of my game. I'm willing to accept its faults. I think I've handled criticism for my game very well. I always have, and I am proud of that. And people on the internet, on YouTube video, sometimes I'd see someone on YouTube reviewing my game or talking about it or something, and like I'd mention it and be like, hey, thanks for talking about the game. I agree with you that it has these flaws, or thank you for saying this. I wasn't sure people would like that. I'm always very humble about it, and that oftentimes encourages people to buy my game. Like they'll read that comment and they'll say, okay, I didn't even care about your game before, but just seeing like the person behind it makes me want to get it just because I want to support people like you. And that feels awesome. And people can't really say that or have that sort of meaningful connection when they're trying so hard to win people over with flashy, like, advertising and marketing. And it made me realize it's like, even though my game could have made me a millionaire, like it did for a couple other people who made backrooms games, I'm glad it didn't. Because sometimes, like what would the cost of that have been? Like, the cost of that honestly probably would have outweighed the money. Like, the cost on my character.
Well, it's like, yeah, you made $1 million off this, but then it's like, okay, I'll just do the same thing again. I mean, I don't think it's like one of those things. I get what you're saying, and I agree with you. I think that it's an admirable way of looking at it, but I think the best way to probably look at it, and once again, objective, right? Don't even think about the money you made from your game is a bonus.
It is a bonus.
You got paid to learn, essentially.
Essentially, yeah. It very much
That's the best thing, right? You got paid to learn to make your next $1 million game. And whenever you're a millionaire, you owe me $5.
I sure do.
I probably should add an adjustable to inflation clause in there. By the time you're a millionaire, I'll be like, $5 will be like 2 pennies,
Yeah, and like, it is kind of crazy though. How I see these other people who made these games, and I think to myself, it's like, imagine I go through the rest of my life, and my best-selling, best-performing game was a freaking backrooms game. That would stink. I would hate that. I would constantly be trying to live up to my very first attempt at a game. And that sounds miserable, because that game, another thing about the game is, like, even though, like, the product itself, I worked hard on it, it's my little baby, but it's not fully mine, because it's an adaptation of
really
other people's ideas.
I often look at Toby Fox as, like, this inspirational indie game developer, and he is. But, like, it's like, oh, why is it taking so long to make Deltarune? Well, it's because anything he releases is going to be compared to not just Undertale, but what people perceive Undertale to be.
Yeah, like, 'cause I remember, like, playing through Deltarune and, like, seeing people talk about it. It's like they said, like, if there was a video about Deltarune, oftentimes they would say, like, Undertale more than they said Deltarune.
Which is, as a creator, has to be such a lame thing to have to go through. And it's something you experience even more as an individual creator, because as an individual creator, you get all the accolades and all of the criticism, right? You can't diffuse creation mistakes to other members of a team.
Yeah. Right?
Which is a very valuable thing to be able to do, because then you're not, like, absolutely shattered whenever somebody shits on your game. You know what I mean? I had
to learn quite quickly to separate myself from the product of my game, and not to let the criticism get to my head too much. Because when someone says, "Oh, the graphics suck," originally I would think, okay, well, the graphics suck because I didn't know how to make them good, and so that means I suck. Yeah. It's like, no. What that means is that I have room to learn and grow, and that should be exciting, not defeating. But it's like the way criticism is often phrased.
It doesn't help that people on the internet are assholes.
They are. Well, and the thing is, I think every piece of destructive criticism has a constructive counterpart.
It does. But you also have to remember that opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got them. And I say that because, yeah, sure, criticism, you can always find maybe some value in criticism. There's also people out there who are not criticizing out of good faith. They just, like, enjoy hating shit.
They do.
And you really got to parse out that from the people who care enough to leave a constructive... It's like you shouldn't ignore criticism. No. But you should ignore the bad criticism. You should. Yeah, you very much should. You have to like I would take criticism from a friend so much more seriously than I would from some random Redditor who's like, my waifu cannot make a cameo in this game. 0 out of 10. I cannot possibly find any sexual enjoyment in this, and that's sad. Or somebody who's like, 0 out of 10. It's like people who are like, the game didn't boot up on my computer. 0 out of 10. It's like, wait, are you're running a Windows 1? That
is okay. It's like, shout out to the PC developers out there, because PC developers have to deal with thousands of combinations of computer parts that could fail for any number of reasons.
Yes.
Meanwhile, like
yes.
a PS5 or a Switch developer can just be like, here's a game, and like it works for everyone on that platform.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
It's the same thing.
No, yeah, PC developers have it real bad. Because here's the thing about PC gamers too. My dad says this. They lie about their fucking setups all the time. They'll be like, I have a GTX 4080, and in fact they're running like a fucking GameCube graphics card on their machine. You know? They're just fucking lying about it.
Yeah.
And that's why Steam has that, was one of the reasons Steam has that. It'll say, hey, can we collect information about your build?
Yeah.
They do that. I'm pretty sure as a developer.
No, as a developer, I can look at the builds of like the average thing that people use, or like, not the average, like the most common thing.
That's
that
really
people
cool
run
that
my
they
game
do
on.
that, because otherwise that has to help so fucking much.
Well, it would help if I knew what to do with that information. I don't.
Well, yeah, that's fair.
But
flame people in your reviews. They could respond, be like, "You fucking bitch! This is what your stuff is." Just like post it.
Post our IP address and all that too.
Yeah.
We don't get to do that as developers. Don't worry.
You live at 1234 South Road Lane.
South Road Lane. That reminds me. No, I won't say that part. I was gonna. Never mind. Yeah, we do have to wrap things up pretty quick, but to kind of talk about this, it's like I really. By the way, yeah, Enter the Backrooms is the name of my game. Got some merch for it that's going to go out very soon. Some self-promotion. But I'm very happy with it. And as time goes on, I just really appreciate everything that happened and everything that didn't happen with that game. Because I'm like, I like where I am right now. And if I'd like made more money, I wouldn't be where I am. If I'd made less money, I wouldn't be where I am. And I'm really comfortable where I am. So I'm like, this is really cool how it's worked out. And again, like I could easily see, like, if I made more money, I'd just constantly be trying to live up to my former self, and that sounds horrible, because I hate ever thinking that, we talked about this, but I hate ever thinking that I'm going to peak someday. I never want to view it like that.
I agree.
Right? And, like, even if I like didn't make more money with future games, like I would be like, well, I'm more proud of this than I was that previous game. So in the end, it's still better. And like, well, that can be true, but it's still, there is a psychological barrier there that you got to push past when it comes to like living up to your past self.
Oh, I definitely feel that.
Yeah.
You know, I know over COVID, I felt really proud of where I was right before COVID in junior year. You know, I was feeling like I was on top of the world and shit. Then COVID happened, and a lot of the developments I made, I felt like I had to like start from ground zero. It felt like, you know, and then I look at that self and I'm like, man, that was so cool, man. I was doing so good. I had an awesome D&D campaign that I was really enjoying, all this sort of stuff, and then it's just like, oh, will I ever be there again? It's like, yeah, you're already past that. Junior high school John couldn't grow a beard, bitch. So let's go. Scratching your beard. You thinking about it?
No.
It's going on pretty nice, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah.
I definitely think that you should consider, whenever it goes in more thick, maybe rocking just a mustache look. I've been thinking about mustaches recently. I'm thinking about like covers the upper lip type of mustache. You know,
Yeah.
I'm talking like pull you over on the highway type mustache.
Like 1920s boxer type mustache.
I'm talking like the mustache could crawl off your face. It's so thick. Mustache. I'm talking absorbs 50% of all liquid about to enter your mouth level. You know what I'm talking about?
And then like literally you ring it out. And it's like, oh, I got.
Have you experienced that yet?
No.
No, because once it gets in thicker, it literally absorbs stuff. I kid you not. It is kind of weird whenever you first experience. Like whenever you like, if you have a beard and you go swimming, you'll get out of the water and you'll literally be able like to wipe like thick amounts of water outside of your beard. It's like hair, you know. Weird way to end. But I gotta go pee. So.
Gotta go pee. All right. I'll respect the pee. Speaking of liquids getting trapped in your facial hair, make sure you're white when you're done. You know.
Justin, we're not supposed to talk about that on camera, man. We're not supposed to talk. That's fucked up, man. Don't believe him. But if you're interested.
No. You know, I hate how this does a thing. Like, if the microphone...
End the video, man. Yeah, fuck, I lost my Riz face.
You never had a...